in charge for this webinar program. Now, we already have four presenters coming from Ministry of Education, Mr. Janapsta, from Save the Children Regional Office that based in Philippines, Ms. Rasro, from Plan International Indonesia, Ms. Murah, and also from World Visi Indonesia, Ms. Betita is the Acting Director of Humanitarian Emergency Affairs. All presenters will have 15 minutes to present their best practices in ASEAN countries, and we will have the discussion for 3 minutes after Ms. Rachel presented hers, because she has other meetings. But after that, we will continue to the second until fourth presenters. And we will have the discussion for 7 until 10 minutes at the last session, and also the wrapping up the summary. Okay, now I will give the role to the moderator. We have a moderator here. He is a program manager of ASEAN Safe Schools Initiative. His name is Mr. Renar Berandi. Over to you, Mr. Renar Berandi.
All right, thank you very much, Melly, for the introduction. Good morning and good afternoon to everyone. Welcome to the first ASI webinar of ASEAN Safe Schools Initiative with the team Educations and Emergencies on 24th of May 2019 at 2 p.m. until 3:20 p.m. So we're going to take this 1.5 hour approximately to do this webinar. Before we begin, okay, if you can actually share whether you can hear my voice. Thank you. Thank you. All right, this webinar is actually technically supported by Wahana PC Indonesia, coming out from the Office of Ministry of Education and Cultures, the Republic of Indonesia, coming out from the Office of National Secretariat for Safer Schools in Indonesia. We're going to have speakers coming from consortium partners, Save the Children, Plan International, World Vision, coming from different locations. So you might have been aware of this link because we're going to do this through the WebEx meeting. So feel free to spread the link if your colleagues or friends would like to join later. This ASI webinar is made possible due to the support of ECHO, Humanitarian Affairs and Civil Protection, ECHO, which is actually funding the ASI project, ASEAN Safe Schools Initiative project. I am Renar Berandi. I am the program manager for ASEAN Safe Schools Initiative. Will be hosting and leading the discussions of this webinar, all together with Melly Octaviani as Knowledge Management Specialist from the ASEAN Safe Schools Initiative Program Management Team. Melly is going to monitor the discussions, comments, and clarifications on the chat box. Before we begin, I would like to remind everyone on how we conduct ourselves in the WebEx. We would like to invite the active participations from everyone. So you might want to also pay attention to this particular point. First, mute your microphone when you are not speaking. So you can actually see the icon of the microphone in your screen. Second, one speaker at a time, so you would be speaking when given a chance by the host. If you have any comments, questions, and clarifications, please leave your message in the chat box, and we will be able to monitor your comments, questions, and clarifications. If you would like to pose a question, please mouse over the right side of your name and click on the hand icon. The host will give you permissions to ask. When you are done asking your questions, please click on the hand icon again to lower the hand so the host will be indicated to actually move on to other participants who are interested in asking the questions. Thank you very much for the participations from all the participants which have entered into the WebEx. Up until now, we have people, players, actors in school safety across different countries and also regions. So mostly those people, the participants are coming from Southeast Asia region, ASEAN countries, but we also would like to say hi to our friends and colleagues from Sweden and also from France and also from India as well. So thank you very much for leaving the message and indicating where you are and your name. We've been hearing about ASEAN Safe School Initiative, and this is why we are conducting this webinar. So this ASEAN Safe School Initiative, for the benefits of the people coming from outside the region, is a government-led sub-regional initiative on comprehensive approach for integrating disaster risk reduction in the education sectors in the ASEAN regions. So it promotes and advocates the comprehensive school safety framework, which is comprised of three pillars. Pillar number one would be safe learning facilities. Pillar number two, school disaster management. And pillar number three is resilience education. It also coordinates with different actors in school safety in ASEAN and also beyond the region as well. So you might have been aware as well that there are logos, various logos on the screen because we are also coordinating and in alignment with the collective efforts done by the School Safety Coalitions in Asia Pacific and also School Safety Coalitions for Alliance at the global levels. The overall goals of the ASEAN Safe Schools Initiative is to ensure that children in ASEAN are more resilient to disasters and have a safe and secure learning environment. It seeks to create a space in Southeast Asia to discuss and share school safety technical resources, approaches, and practices to minimize the impact of disasters to children and to the education sector. It is very important to have this ASEAN Safe School Initiative in the regions because this is acknowledged by the ASEAN government as its program and part of the priority of the ASEAN Agreement on Disaster Management and Emergency Response, Work Plan, and also ASEAN Education Sector Work Plan for 2016-2020. Why is it so important for us to discuss about the educations in emergencies and to implement educations in emergencies in ASEAN? To brief, and of course, we're going to explore more a little bit with our speakers. When disaster strikes, education is one of the first activities suspended, and children's learning is affected by their lack of access to education, but also psychological stress and trauma due to the disasters and emergency situations. They are at risk to remain out of schools permanently. In fact, in conflict settings, for examples, girls are 2.5 times more likely to be out of school. That is based on the report done by the UNICEF. In the aftermath of a Lombok earthquake, tsunami, and earthquake in Palu, for example, thousands of boys and also girls are affected by the disasters, whereas thousands of schools were severely damaged or damaged by tsunami and earthquake in Palu. That hampers the access of children to their rights of education. Going to the Philippines, for examples, 1 million students face extended period of being out of schools due to the impacts of Typhoon Mangkhut. In this particular webinar, this is our agenda. We're going to have four speakers coming from different locations, one coming from even other continents. Rachel Fermin is actually on deployment in Mozambique, but she's based in the Philippines as Education and Emergency Advisors, Save the Children at Regional Office. We're going to discuss about the overall concepts of education and emergencies. We have also presenter coming from Plan International Indonesia, Ida Ngurah. She is Disaster Risk Management National Project Manager. She's going to discuss about the concept into practices of education in emergency learning from Indonesia. We're going to also discuss about multi-stakeholder engagements led by the government for education in emergencies in Indonesia. It's going to be discussed further by Mr. Janaka. And last but not least, Ms. Bevita Mediawati from World Vision's Wahana Visi Indonesia. She's going to guide us through on psychosocial support for children in times of emergency. All of these presentations will be followed by discussions, evaluations, and also closing. Now, going to Mozambique, we're going to invite Rachel Fermin. Rachel, please guide us through the overall concepts and theoretical frameworks of education in emergencies.
Hello, can you hear me? How's
Yes,
my
Rachel.
audio? Okay, so I
It's
guess
very
it's a
good.
good
We're
afternoon.
going to,
Thank you. Okay, it's a good afternoon to everyone. It's my morning here in Mozambique. Thank you for having me in this webinar. Just a quick check, Renar. Will you be showing my PowerPoint? Are you able to show it?
yes, I'm going to arrange your PowerPoint.
Okay. As mentioned by Renar, this version of the webinar is all about the overall overview concept of the concept of education in emergencies. So I'm just waiting for the slides to come up. But
Yeah.
while that's happening, let me just start by leveling off on our understanding of what an emergency is.
Yep.
An emergency is a serious disruption of the functioning of a society, causing widespread human, material, and/or environmental losses. And this kind of disruption um, exceeds the ability of the population to cope. So they can't do it on their own using their own resources. Basically, that's what an emergency or a disaster would mean. And it also, during emergencies, it also exacerbates the existing barriers and even creates new ones. On to the next slide. So what is education and emergency? So you can see at the top, when an emergency happens, education and learning of children is disrupted, and it also increases the risks for children. For what we do in education and in emergencies is to mitigate the disruption and allow the continuity of learning to help protect children during these difficult times. So education in emergencies is the provision of structured learning, quality learning opportunities, both formal and non-formal, and allow education to continue in times of crisis. Now, just to level off again on some of these words, when we say formal, we mean education or learning that takes place in classrooms with trained teachers, while non-formal would normally happen outside the classroom such as in the community. And all of this, we believe, will contribute directly to the survival and development of children. Renar mentioned in his earlier introduction that during emergencies, children's education is one of the first to be disrupted. Unfortunately, in most humanitarian responses, education is not always prioritized. They think that what would be the most crucial would be providing water and sanitation services and food, which we don't really argue with. But we believe that education is just as important as those services. So this is why we believe education in emergencies should be provided right away during a humanitarian response. Next slide, please. We do education in emergencies because number one, it protects children. For every hour that the children are in school or in PLS or in child-friendly spaces, children are protected from physical harm. They may be, if they're not there in those schools, they may be on the road, exposed to dangers and risks of exploitation and abuses. While when they are in those TLS or child-friendly spaces, they will be around people who are trained, who value them, and who can take care of them. So for children, school also provides them a sense of normality because school is something that they go to every day, and when there's an emergency or a disruption of their usual schedule, then they would think that things are not normal. But when they go back to school, it's like everything is back to how it was. Number two, because education in emergencies can be a life-saving platform. This is where we can deliver all those life-saving messages on water and sanitation, how to wash your hands to avoid cholera, how to avoid landmines, and what to do in case there's an earthquake or an aftershock. Number three, it sustains communities. If you have a whole generation of children who are not able to go to school because of an emergency, just imagine how that community will be able to recover from the crisis that they're in. So if you have children who continue learning and youth and young people who are able to go back to school, then the recovery of that community, which would be much easier. Next slide. It builds knowledge. Of course, education, we know it can develop academic skills, but it can also give them, the children, the core life skills, such as decision making, coping with stress, and even new skills in vocational and technical. Number five is it strengthens resilience. Crisis and emergencies can really be very difficult for children, but our education programs can mitigate the impacts of the crisis. For example, in our DRR programs, we can include education in the curriculum and help improve the preparedness of schools through the plans that we help them develop to prepare for future emergencies. And of course, number six, education is a right. Now, this is a right that does not change whether it's during non-emergencies or emergencies. So this should not be changed whether they are in crisis. And that's why we have to give them, ensure that they have access to education even through emergencies. Next slide, please. This slide just shows you what goes on in a development of a child from newborn until the child is considered youth. Now, an emergency can disrupt or negatively impact this process. And through the EIE programs that we have, we want to prevent and mitigate any of these negative impacts on children. Next, please. So what happens during emergencies? Now, this continuum that I will be showing you in the next slides just shows you what takes place. This is what happens in development education programs. development programs, meaning pre-emergencies or during non-emergency times. And we do have gains because of in our programs because it's peaceful. There's no crisis happening. And then next slide. And then when an emergency happens, you can see that the gains that we have had during non-emergency can be destroyed or damaged. For example, in Nepal, just before the earthquake, it was slowly but surely increasing and improving its primary enrollment rate from 64% in 1990 to over 95% in 2015. But then the earthquake happened in April 2015, and this kind of emergency or disaster can truly disrupt the gains that we have had in the sector. Next slide, please. That's what happens. Next slide. What does education in emergency do? EI interventions can be the productive bridge during this period of emergency so that we don't lose the progress that we have had before the emergency. Next, please. And aside from protecting our gains, it is also an opportunity for us to build back better. Now that we know where the weaknesses are, the areas for improvement, this is something that we can improve on. Sorry, I just saw the comment. How's my audio now? Is it okay? Okay.
Rachel, sorry to interrupt you. Can you turn up the volumes or maybe get closer to your microphone?
Okay. Sorry. Yes. How's this now?
This is
How's this now?
slightly
It's
better.
still very soft.
Yeah, slightly better.
Okay. I'm sorry, you might have missed some of the points that I've earlier mentioned, but the slides that I'm showing just shows you what kind of what EIE can do to protect the gains that we've had in the development programs. Next slide. We can skip that slide and go to the next one. This is on the platform for integration. So education does not have to be a standalone program. It is actually an opportunity for other sectors to also bring in their own interventions. For example, child protection through the psychosocial support provided to teachers and to students, and to the okay. I'm still having problems with my audio. Hello.
Yeah, Rachel, I think we can hear you, but very softly, so you can just keep going, not a problem.
All right. So as I was saying, it's a platform for integrating other sectors such as WASH, health and nutrition. Like these are the most common ones that we usually integrate in EIE. But these are things that make sense because children do not have just education as a priority. They have to think about their food, their sanitation, and of course their protection issues, especially during these difficult times. Next slide, please. All right. So effective coordination can be done through the education cluster. These are the different clusters, the humanitarian clusters, and one of them is education. We do need to coordinate our response because we want to prevent duplication of our interventions, and we want to make sure that we reach the most marginalized and all children who are in need. Next, please. And these are the common components of EIE. This is not everything. But these are some of the common examples that we do in EIE. Next, please. These are all just pictures, mostly pictures. So these are the temporary classrooms. The one on the right is what we built for in Indonesia response. And these designs would vary depending on the context and the culture, the climate, and the need, of course. Next, please. These are tents, and these are just tents again. Next, please. Provision of teaching and learning materials. The contents of these materials of these kits would have to be agreed on by the cluster and have to be standardized so that children will be receiving the same content, regardless of the organization providing the kits. Next, please. We train teachers because there might be some opportunities for new content to be taught, like psychological first aid, psychosocial support, which the teachers may not have been trained on before the emergency. Next. Life-saving skills, such as what to do if there's a more flooding or aftershock of earthquakes, which they can also share with their household. Very similar to what we do with DRR and emergency preparedness. And my last slide, how do we link this with what we're doing in ASEAN? Next, please. Okay. All that we're doing right now in ASEAN Safe School Initiative and with what we're doing for EIE, this is all to build education sector resilience. And we say this is not an end state, but a process. So when you look at the first picture of the child on the left, on comprehensive school safety, this is what we do in ASEAN. And when a disaster or an emergency strikes, then we provide education in emergencies, such as what I have shown you earlier, which are the tents and the kits. But then as we build back better, we go back to doing comprehensive school safety activities. And that's how it all ties up with what we're doing in the development and emergency phase. And the last slide is my last slide. Thank you so much. If you have questions, I'm sorry about the problem with the audio, but I hope you were able to catch some of my talk. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Rachel, for the presentation. It was really interesting to know that there is a common fact and also reality that we are actually facing, that although education is important sectors to be met during the emergency situations, but then it is sometimes not prioritized. And there is also interesting slide that actually says presented about the fact that education sector needs to be coordinated with also other sectors to prevent duplications. And education and emergency platforms is actually integrating the other sectors as well. Coming within that is child protection, WAS, health and nutrition. As Rachel will not be able to stay for the durations of the webinars, I would like to invite participants to ask questions to Rachel. Maybe we can take 2 questions for the durations of 3 minutes. You can actually press on the hand icon to indicate me if you are interested in asking questions to Rachel. Okay, while we are waiting for the interest of posing a questions from everyone in the webinar. Rachel, you are now in Mozambique, right? Can you also share a little bit of your experience in terms of education in emergencies in perhaps the context of Mozambique and the hazards that has affected the country?
Oh, yes. So actually, we're here for two cyclone responses. Um, and unfortunately, there are a lot of schools that have been damaged or completely destroyed by the cyclones. But the thing is, most of the children here, even before the cyclone, were already vulnerable. Most were living in poverty, so they really had not. They didn't have much. And when the cyclone happened, what they had as school supplies were all damaged or flooded. So now the most basic materials for school, they are they are much needed here. And many of the schools that have already been damaged by the cyclone were also in not so good condition before the cyclone. So a lot of work needs to be done in construction. These are for the most immediate and urgent needs, but there's also a lot of need to improve quality um, of learning, um, because Mozambique has one of the lower literacy rates and globally. So this is an opportunity as well to build back better for actors here in this response, as well as the government. But much very similar to Asia, the government is very engaged in the response, and they are leading the cluster here.
All right, we do have questions coming from the audience in the chat box. So, from Maulina from Indonesia, how can educations in emergency impact the baby born toddler? Do you have any specific component targeting baby born toddler?
So what we do is for parents sometimes, because at this phase, this child would be more dependent on the efforts of the caregivers. Sorry, there's a lot of background noise. Hello. So much of the intervention can be focused on parenting sessions, giving them guidance on how to do stimulation for the toddler so they can work at home. And at this stage, they want the younger kids would be in ECCD level, and there would be play-based activities that should be available for them, because if they do not have that opportunity for that age level, children learn through play. So they should have activities that would also give them opportunities to learn. Hello.
Yes, thank you,
Yeah.
Rachel. So, basically, Rachel just shared us about the impacts of the cyclones happening in the Mozambique as well, basically targeting the school supplies and also basic necessities of education, and also to improve the education's level and literacy as well, which is actually part of the issues of development, and that's why it's very important to link the emergencies with the education. And then when it comes to ECCD, Rachel's also shared that the parenting sessions to actually target the toddlers or early childhood on early childhood is also happening over there as well. So thanks,
And
Rachel.
play-based,
Maybe we,
sorry, just to add, play-based activities for that age group, because that's how they learn.
what is that again? Day-based activity?
Play-based activities.
Oh, play-based activity. That's actually something that we need to highlight on. All right then. So Rachel, thank you very much. And we can actually move on to Idangura. Miss Ida Ngura, we've heard about the concepts, no? Ngura has been involved in a number of emergencies over the last couple of years, and then she would definitely be having a lot of resources to share in terms of the practices of education in emergencies. So, Ngura, take this over, and then we'll listen up to you.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. And Rachel, it's nice to see you on video. Oh, it's not you. It's nice to see you again, hearing your voice. And thank you, Renar and Melly, for having me. Is my voice is clear enough for you all? Hello, Renar. Is my voice is clear?
I think it's loud and clear. Thank you very much, Laura.
Okay. So I will take I will share the presentation from my laptop so I can move easily. And this is EIE practices in Indonesia based on our sharing project from Lombok and Lombok earthquake and also Central Sulawesi earthquake and tsunami. Both happened last year in Indonesia. So move quickly about what is Plan Indonesia. I will just go through very quick on this one, just to flag that Plan International has been nationally registered into national foundation. We call ourselves Yayasan Plan International Indonesia. So through this Yayasan, actually Plan International and Yayasan Plan Indonesia can go and support all area affected in Indonesia, because in Lombok and Central Sulawesi, government didn't allow international assistance at that time. So it's really support. It's really help us to support the people in Lombok and Sulawesi through this year. And I would like to share with you about relevancy of our response in both area. So based on our rapid need assessment, 2 until 1 week after the crisis, we found that there is four major sector that need to be intervened in the affected area. The first one is shelter, where the most of people affected lose their house, and then they go to the evacuation camp. So shelter is needed. And then child protection, as a Lombok and Central Sulawesi prior the crisis is also vulnerable for issue for child protection, for example, like early child marriage, child labor, child trafficking, etc. So prior crisis, they already being vulnerable. So and after the crisis become worse, getting worse. And then from the education, as Rachel mentioned, same situation in Indonesia, that the school was damaged and the learning material was lost, and some of students and teachers as well become the victim, and then they also move out from their village and their area to other place. So it's kind of like a very disrupted situation. And the last sector we intervene is water, sanitation and hygiene promotion, where this sector is not really stand-alone activity, but combined and integrated into education and shelter and child protection. And we also use case transfer programming, or you may familiar with case-based programming. It's kind of like same terminology, same activity. Next slide this is the very quick overview about where we work in both area. The first one is earthquake in Lombok. You may see the activity that we already conducted there, and it's already closed last March. Uh, from the education sector, and from the education sector we provided temporary learning space, and then we distributed school kit, and then teacher trainings, and then many other activities that I will elaborate in details in next slide. The second place is called Central Sulawesi, earthquake and tsunami. Actually, there was also liquefaction. So the program, the response of Plan Indonesia is also in four sector, including the sector that I already mentioned before. So basically, the intervention is related same for education. We build temporary learning space and distributed school kit and also hygiene kit in school, and then
Hi, Nura. I think we are losing you. Um, we can wait for a couple of seconds, dear participants, in order for waiting for Nura to come back into the online.
we also develop yeah. Hi, Lena.
Hi, Nura. Keep going, please. We just lost you, but then you came back in. So please keep going. Hello.
Okay.
Yes. Carry on.
Yeah. Okay. I hope that my voice is clear now. Maybe it's kind of like lost connection in Palu. So I will continue the presentation now, bigger one, because I put it in slide. So our response based on core humanitarian standard. It is based on real-time review that conducted by Plan International. It is mandatory review for big response within Plan International. So based on the review, we found that our response is already comply with the nine principle of core humanitarian standard. The first one is the response is appropriate and relevant, as you may see from the previous slide that the four main sector we intervene is based on our rapid need assessment and conducted in early beginning after crisis. And the second one is humanitarian response is effective and timely. We quick activated our ERT and quick drafting and develop our emergency response planning based on the initial funding, and then we also strengthen our local CSO and local NGO government partners. We are not implement our project our intervention by ourselves, but we also engage our local partner and local government here. And then community participation has been encouraged, but particularly for activity that we might need more people to help us. For example, like building the temporary learning space or during the distribution. So they help us. Community help us to conduct the activity, and then the feedback and complaint. We also try to ensure that the children feedback from the what we have given to them is really taken in account. And then the coordination with other agencies and donor cluster system is activated both in national and subnational level for education cluster, for child protection cluster, self-help cluster, and WAS cluster. And we continue also the 7. We continue learning ourselves through research, and we continue learning from the children through the activity we call as listening to children, where we find perspective and ideas and opinion from children themselves, and refreshment activity about staff and good community consultation. Okay, the next slide is okay. If Racha already mentioned you about the INI minimum standard we use in this response for education in emergency, that they have 5 domains and 19 standards. That I will not really go in details for the domain and standard, but as you can see in the slide, that the difference between each section that you will read from the book, that standard are what you want to read, key action are suggested action that to be taken, and guidance notes that cover good practices and lesson learned that you can apply as well according your context. So this is the sharing from what we have done in Indonesia in both area. For the first domain called foundational standard, there is some domain and then a standard in this domain. The first one is participation, community participation and resource. And then the top picture shows you that during the development, during the building, construction of the temporary learning space or child-friendly space in the community level, or wash facilities like latrines or water harvesting is conducted with a community-based construction mechanism. So we engage local labor, skilled and unskilled labor from community or community surrounded to help us to support. And then we use local resource. So as long as there is a local resource, for example, like stone, wood, or etc., that can help support to build that facilities, we try to get them from the local community. And the second one is coordination. Coordination is very important for us since beginning of the response, not for not having the response really overlapping, or is to avoid misunderstanding or miscommunication among us, because it's not only plan working and support the community, but also other NGOs and other private sectors also working here and support. So it's really important to have all coordinated under government as a focal point and duty bearer. And the last one for this domain is about analysis from the assessment, from the rapid need assessment, and then we develop our emergency response plan, and then we conduct monitoring and evaluation. So in the below picture, you can see our feedback mechanism, child-friendly feedback mechanism that already translated to Bahasa Indonesia. So it's really useful for our local partner and local staff in Lombok and Palu to conduct child-friendly feedback mechanism. Renan, I think someone need to mute.
Thanks, Mura. So, please mute any participants. Please mute your microphone. And Mura, just to also make use of this time as well, if you could wrap up in 1 minute. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, and then the second domain, I really will be very quick. Second domain is access and learning environment where equal access, so everyone in the school, every children in that area can enroll to the temporary learning space that been built in that area. So it's also inclusive design, where children with disability also can access the classroom, and also there is a latrine that separated window between with a separated door between girls and boys to avoid the sexual sexual gender based violence, and then also this protection and well-being and facilities and service. So we distribute school kits and also try to protect children from the disease, from hand washing campaign, and also the left one picture, the left top picture is about the menstrual hygiene management campaign for young girls and women. And the third domain is teaching and learning. Basically, we develop capacity for teachers and also para teachers where there is no teacher available in community. Then community can step in and support the school to be a para teacher, but they need to be kind of like trained and capacities about how to teach the children, and then how to develop their school being a child-friendly school, and also how they can make their school inclusive, and also teaching and learning pedagogy methodology. And teacher and fourth domain, teacher and other personnel, this is basically support. We try to get the teacher get support from their school supervisor, from education offices, and also other NGOs playing around in the area. And the education policy, this is how we conduct our advocacy, how we develop our advocacy together with government, both in national and subnational. For example, when we are advocate for ministry to have incentive for teachers, affected teachers, and then how we advocate ministry also to help teachers, to support teacher on their training, etc. So basically, the education policy is really also important part that mostly we forget about because we focus on the access and learning and teachers, but the advocacy as education policy is also important. And yeah, that's I think it's 1 minute, Rena.
Well, thank you very much, Mura. Really calling out from Palu and really for sharing us the real practices of education in emergencies. And that was actually in alignment with what Rachel had already said in terms of the conceptual framework of education in emergency. Mura touched upon really important point, which is coordinations and education's policies. And coordinations was actually highlighted by Ngura, saying that this needs to be under the leaderships of the Ministry of Education and also Culture. So to draw out these particular components of education and emergency, Let's invite Pak Janaka. He is from the Ministry of Education and Culture, the Republic of Indonesia, to actually present the multi-stakeholder engagements in education in emergencies. Over to you, Pak.
Presentation, coordination mechanism on education in emergency. Okay. Next slide. Disasters impact in education is education service and learning in school disturbed because of damage of school facilities, access to school disrupted, student and teachers was displaced due to their house damage, school supplies for learning was damaged, and students and parents are afraid to go back to school. Teachers and students become victim of rubble of building or house. Okay. Next. Okay, here information about number of schools affected by from September 2016 to April 2019. We can see the school affected based on disasters and school affected based on school level. Okay, next. Here, Safe School implementation regulated by Ministry of Education and Culture degrees. Final formulation on progress. Here we can see national governments, local government, school, community participations responsible to disaster management in first disaster risk reductions, emergency response coordinated by education clusters, and recovery. Okay, next. Program on emergency response and recovery in education sector. First, education cluster activations, coordinations, assessment, management of resources, activities, and distribution of items to meet emergency needs in field, coordination with command center, and monitoring education in emergency. In facilitating emergency school, building temporary classroom, student learning supply distributions, was in emergency school, psychosocial support for teachers and students, training for teachers and volunteers for education school, and monitoring of acceptance of students of disaster victims who study outside the area. Okay, and in the recovery we have rehabilitation reconstructions and relocation of school buildings, learning recovery, incentive for teachers affected, and scholarship for student affected. Okay, next. Implementation stage of emergency school. First, we have assessment, learning activity planning, training for teachers and volunteers, establish temporary class, starting learning activities. Learning activities and material consists of psychosocial assessment, environment, recreational activities, literacy, art, and religion. Learning outcomes assessment, monitoring and evaluation, and reporting and emergency school closure. Okay. Next. Here we can see the command center structures of disaster emergency response, and cluster education is in operation. Okay, next. Here, organization of structure of education cluster. Head of education cluster is Kadistrict Provinsi. It means head office education district, with National Safe School of MOEC. And then we have Secretariat, Deputy, and Quality Assurance and Monitoring and Evaluation, Data and Information, Emergency School, Facilities, Teachers, Media, and Learning Supplies, Logistics and Operational. Okay. Here the task of education cluster in assessment and data collection, school damage, teacher and student affected, the need of education emergency, stakeholder mapping, who, what, where, and when, resources, coordination, meet the needs of temporary classroom, meet the needs of student learning equipment, increase student participation in school, fulfillment of psychosocial support activities, facilitating the implementation of emergency school, information management, publish regularly on the progress of the education emergency response, coordinator with the command center, so that emergency education response data include the data issued by command center, and presenting data gap and fulfillment of assistance and supplies. Aid management, ensuring assistance and supplies can be managed properly, ensuring equitable relief and do not overlap, and ensure the fulfillment of emergency school supplies. Next, here the role of nation government on education, coordination with local government to ensure the continuity of education in emergency situation, establish the policy in education in emergency, ensure the level of security and feasibility of building education unit and still be used post-disaster, and establish monitoring and evaluation, and deliver the information on the progress of emergency education response regularly to publics. Okay, the role of local government in activating of education cluster, formulating the policy of education emergency, deliver the psychosocial support in school, school damage and loss assessment, facilitating the implementation of emergency school, monitoring and evaluation, coordinating the aid from stakeholder, school building and feasibility study, provide the situation report on the progress of emergency school implementations. And in school, report the impact of disaster, organize the emergency school, identify the student and teacher who have fled out, moved out of the area, integrating psychosocial support, and report regularly on the implementation of school emergency to the education office and education cluster. Okay, that's all. Thank you very much.
Right. Thank you very much, Janaka from the Ministry of Education. We discussed about the overall coordinations, but also steps, yeah, the process of implementing the education in emergencies, learning from Indonesia as well. One of the tasks that Pak Janaka actually mentions, owned by the Ministry of Education, is to make sure the delivery of psychosocial support for the community, but also for the children and students and school community at large. So, with on that note, we're going to invite Bevita. She is the acting director, humanitarian emergency affair from Wahana Visi, Indonesia. Has been also involved in emergency response and also ASEAN Safe School Initiative over the last couple of years. So, but Bevita, just take it over, guide us through on children's psychosocial well-being and resilience in times of emergencies.
Okay, thank you, Ronald. I'm Bevita from Wanafis Indonesia, a partner of World Vision International. So I'm glad actually Rachel and Pajanaka already mentioned about the need to have like a psychosocial support in the education in emergency, because this is actually what we have felt during our emergency operation. So I would like also to share that in the earthquake and tsunami emergency response in Central Sulawesi, we just conducted the listening to the children research, and we have found that there's a lot of like key changing in felt by the school the children. So from the research, we found that here, like for example, they say that they have to learn in the emergency school then. So for them, it's actually they're very glad because they can meet their friend that have a lot. And another thing, another statement that we have actually, although they have like regular attending school in term for exam, but they also like missing like the regular school, like the teacher also often absent. There is no like a normal lesson. So the key message is here is actually the education in emergency is actually a very good start to give the sense of normal situation to the children. So it makes them feel positive. So the research is actually conducted like 3-4 months after the earthquake and tsunami, and but we actually conduct the research based on the same research after the earthquake in Nepal, which is in 2016. So we try to listen what is actually what the need from the children. 1 year after the earthquake in Nepal, they actually already attending like the school, but they also found that the structure of the school is not earthquake resistant. So we also consider that the need that for them to have like how to have to in line with the school safety approach, which is related about the physical structure. And another thing is really what we have also learned from the research in Nepal is actually about the child protection issue, because 1 year after the earthquake, they have a lot of issue related about the child protection. And the thing is actually how in the school, how exactly the teacher or the other education personnel can handle that kind of situation, like how to make a referral system, or probably something the mechanism for that. So this is kind of like very important for us to be follow up. And so the thing is actually is related about mental health and psychosocial support. We also refer to the one that has been initiated by Interagency Standing Committee in 2007. How the social support is actually not is aimed to promote the psychosocial support, psychosocial well-being, but another thing that we have to highlight is actually how to strengthen the resiliency, meaning about the children and also the education personnel, and also the other domains for education in emergency. So what we have bear in mind that when we do the psychosocial support intervention, we need to also refer to the 4 tiers of the intervention pyramid. So meaning about the basic services and security, community and family support, and about the focus non-specialized support and specialized services. So there's a lot of learning that we have identified. For example, like whenever like related about the domain of the access and learning environment. The thing that from the Nepal earthquake response, we learned that when we change from the child-friendly spaces into the temporary learning spaces, it's actually a media to reach the children in need for the psychosocial support. But in terms of the spaces itself, we also have to acknowledge that the school safety, especially the pillar 1, need to be integrated in that particular cases. And also to prevent related about child protection issue, that the teachers and the education personnel should be trained to understand how to strengthen the existing support system. Another thing is related about the teaching and learning. So the thing is, what we have also learned that we need to also modify our teaching of skill is more about promote resilience, especially for the children, and also like concerning about the inclusion. So meaning like how to support the children ability and confidence to recognize and respond for the threat itself. So another thing also related about teachers and other educational personnel. I think we have learned also from Australian when we try to like train the teacher how to conduct the psychosocial support through the training. We sometimes forgot that the teacher can be a victim too in terms of disaster. So sometimes during the training, it's becoming like for them to like sharing their experience rather than they can give the support. So meaning that in terms of that situation, we have to identify first whether they can actually deliver the support, or we need to treat them first. And another thing I think also mentioned by Ida Ngurah from the Plan International Indonesia Experience, when the teacher also, we need to support them as part of their well-being, need to be support them. Like a CAF programming, CAF and voucher programming also address also for the teacher to support them as well. And another thing is where we also learn related about the psychosocial support is actually we cannot do only the intervention at the school setting. we need to involve actually the family support and also the community support. And especially for the faith leader also play a key role in terms of the psychosocial support. Meaning that we have also do some like a intervention or probably like doing some education for all of them. And for the education policy, I think it's a good example already mentioned by Pak Janaka when we try to also like include the psychosocial support is actually being coordinated by education cluster. And also the thing is actually we also have to bear in mind that the psychosocial support should be part of the systemic approach. If we want to strengthen the resiliency, it's becoming has to be like the preparedness from the education sector. So the key recommendation that we have at the moment is actually how to strengthen the preparedness, resilience for the psychosocial support intervention through the community-based approach. Meaning that like expanding from the school to the community, the involving the faith leader, and also for from the family support. And I think that's actually how to also to promote the psychological first aid, social and emotional learning, and other psychosocial support fundamental in teacher training curriculum. And I think it's actually the last one is actually how to strengthen the children resilience through education activities as part of the Safe School Initiative. This is will be in line with the Pillar 3 of the Safe School Initiative. I think that's all from my side. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Devida, for this interesting presentations that you coincidentally tied everything up of the whole preceding presentations from Pak Janaka, Rachel's, and also Ngurah as well. And there are actually connections, and there should be linkage in terms of educations and emergencies and psychosocial support among school community and also community at large throughout different sectors and domains as well. So we are now getting into the questions and answer sessions. I would like to remind everyone who is interested in asking the questions to raise their hand by clicking on the hand icon, so we can be indicated who will be asking the questions. And for now, we do have a questions coming from Mas Andri from Yogyakarta. We all agree that education in emergencies is important, and we should create education in emergency planning. The question is, in what period the planning for education in emergency should be done or should be created? Maybe we can have these questions to anybody, Ngurah or Mbak Pevita or Pak Janaka as well. Yeah. So the questions is like the planning for education in emergency. How when should it be created? Yeah.
Okay, hello everyone. My name is Zamzam. I'm part of National Secretariat of Safe School. About the planning of emergency in education in emergency, I think we could create the contingency plan as a part in education sector. So as a part of that document, we formulated or created the how can we manage the education in emergency sector. And the other important thing is how to improve local capacity. It's like head education office and local partner, how they manage to implement in the education in emergency sector. It's like we could conducted the training for the local government officer, teachers, volunteers, and for local partners. So if disaster occur in the local level, so they first as frontliners to respond education in emergency. And in our side, in government, Indonesian government, Ministry of Education and Culture, we already formulated the guideline of the education in emergency sector. It's specific for how to implement the emergency school. Yeah, I think that's. Thank you.
Maybe we can go to Mura. Maybe you can elaborate more on timing for the planning
Yeah,
of education and
yeah.
emergencies. Yeah.
Thank you, Renar, and thank you for Andrianto from Jogja for the question. Yes, agree with what Tamzam just mentioned to you that the IAI planning should be developed not only during the disaster or not only after disaster or crisis striking. So it's better to have the planning beforehand for the pre-crisis preparedness emergency. For example, like you have your policy saying that if an emergency happen, the teacher should have this and should have done that and etc. So it's better to have that policy prior the crisis, and also it's better also to have a planning and implement teacher training how to increase the capacity if a crisis happen, and then if the situation is changing, for example, like they are not in normal situation like teaching in class, but maybe they can teach in other places, for example, like under the tree or with, using minimum learning material. So it's also better to increase their capacity before the crisis, as well as Bevita mentioned that during the construction or renovation or rehabilitation your school as well, it's better to have the design is really safe and resilient to disaster according to your hazard and etc. So actually, IAI planning is not developed only after or during the disaster or crisis, but it's better to have it beforehand. Thank you, Renat.
All right. We still have time to have the questions from the participants. And I saw Eza actually raised his or her hand. So I'd like to invite Eza to speak. Hello. Yeah. Eza, are you interested in asking the questions to one of the speakers? Please indicate to whom the questions is addressed. Okay. All right then. All right. So thank you very much for the participations of the whole participants coming from different regions and countries. Apparently, that's the time we have for today. So to conclude this, basically we've actually took notes of points coming from all of speakers that education is actually not prioritized, tend to be not unprioritized in times of disasters, although everyone agree that education in emergency is actually very important. And we've actually just had a set of practices, concept into practices coming from Indonesia, the learning and also the lessons. When it comes to educations in emergencies, teaching and learning materials, school kits, and there is also elements of cash transfer as well and psychosocial support. All of this needs to be coordinated, of course, by different stakeholders under the leaderships of the ministries. I think Pak Janaka also mentions that when disaster happens in particular regions, the head or the chief of disaster emergency is actually locally based, but also in coordinations with the national education office as well, or Ministry of Education. And last but not least, Mbak Pevita actually highlighted about the psychosocial support that needs to be integrated into the whole education's policy system as well, and part of the education's clusters domains to be handled. And it needs to have also systemic approach to this particular elements. I think but Bevita also mentions very important points that the end goals will be building the resilience of the children, and that would also include a lot of elements of DRR in education sectors, comprehensive school safety framework, and also the preparedness of the whole community, not only school community, but also the community at large, to be responsive and to be resilient to disasters facing them. So to end this, I would like to have a short evaluation for a few minutes. We would like to hear your comments basically. So we would like to evaluate the running of the webinar, typing on the chat box. How did you find this webinar? Please type A, B, or C. That could be also the combinations of the letters as well. A, I found it very interesting. B, I found something new, and C, I did not learn very much. So Melly, maybe you can help read out the evaluations results briefly.
Back again with me, with Melly. Thank you very much for the presenters that already present for the good, interesting presentation and also engaging presentations. And for the evaluation, we have the score A and B. And then for the next webinar, we will have the 4th week of June. We still not have the exact date, but we will give information later. And then the second time is about technical and non-technical risk assessment in school safety. Please still stay tuned with ASEAN Safe Schools Initiative, and then we are really glad that you can join our first webinar. Thank you.
Thanks, Melly. Last but not least, for closing, for the improvements of the organizings of the webinar and also the content and sharing on the discourses on education and emergencies, or maybe if you would like to also propose an interesting topic to be discussed in our next series of webinars, please send emails and your view to Camelia, Camelia_Octaviani at wvi.or.id. So on that note, we would like to extend our appreciations to all the participants and also for all the speakers as well coming from different locations. That's all the time we have for today, and see you at the next webinar. Thank you very much, everyone.